White House and what's in that briefing room. Also, MSNBC political analyst Eli Stokols, Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter from the Associated Press, and an MSNBC political analyst. Also with us, Jennifer Rubin, an opinion writer and author of the Washington Post Right Turn blog. And Bruce Klingner is a senior research fellow for Northeast Asia with the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former CIA deputy division chief for Korea. Bruce, I want to start with you. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, right there, telling reporters that she is not legitimizing the regime, or the president's not legitimizing the regime by meeting with Kim Jong-un, but they're not going to meet with him until there are, as she said, concrete and verifiable steps taken. Have any idea what those steps need to be?
Well, the South Korean delegation said that the North had agreed to not do any missile or nuclear tests prior to as long as the dialogue was continuing, and that they had pledged to denuclearize, but with some very heavy strings attached. So I'm not sure what steps North Korea would be taking between now and May, other than meeting with U.S. officials to work out really a more detailed agenda as to what items would be discussed. She
also said that the president's not legitimizing Kim Jong-un. She's not giving him what he wants, which is a photo op with the president of the United States. She tried to turn around to reporters and say that we're legitimizing him, even though we're just reporting what the president has been doing, including the tweets he's launched against North Korea. You told me, though, in your opinion, your expert analysis, will the president risk legitimizing him by having a meeting with him?
Well, it all depends on how the meeting goes. If you have detailed preparations where you have a comprehensive list of issues of concern to us and our allies, particularly security issues, then you would have a productive meeting. If you don't have preparations, or if North Korea refuses to address the issues that we want to address, then it'll be a less successful meeting. But remember, a couple weeks ago, some were critical of the South Korean president for having the North Korean athletes and senior delegations as legitimizing them, and therefore Vice President Pence went to try to send a message countering that. If you don't have a successful meeting and you just have a grip and grin meeting, then you haven't accomplished what you need to.
Does Sarah Huckabee Sanders and this administration have a point when they say that nobody has done anything else before, that this regime has only gotten stronger, that they've been building on their nuclear capabilities, now they have nuclear capabilities, it's time to do something different, even if that different thing is going to be against all of the past knowledge, all of the past best practices?
Right. Well, North Korea is an incredibly difficult foreign policy problem. No political party or administration really has a monopoly on good or bad ideas. When she said that North Korea is agreeing to things it's never agreed to, well, in a way, they haven't agreed to anything yet. We're just hearing what South Korea says they've agreed to. North Korea has not publicly affirmed the South Korean depiction of it, but also everything that North Korea reportedly said to the South Koreans has been part of agreements in the past or are called for under existing UN resolutions.
Jennifer Rubin, you're skeptical of this. You've got an op-ed out today.
Yes.
Let me read a portion of it. Kim has observed the autocratic leaders of, Kim has observed the autocratic leaders of Russia, China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the Philippines play Trump like a fiddle. The president's enormous ego makes him easy to prey for experienced flatterers. Presumably, Donald Trump's advisors are telling him that Kim Jong-un is going to try to play him. Can they convince him? Is that enough to go into it clear-eyed?
Donald Trump doesn't even listen to his lawyers who tell him not to tamper with witnesses, so he's completely uncontrollable. Listen, I think there are two things going on. The big takeaway from this press conference was they walked back a huge mistake. What you heard in that room is they really haven't agreed to a meeting. They've agreed to certain conditions which the North Koreans are never going to meet. They are not in the business of denuclearizing. And so making that a condition means there is not going to be a meeting. I think the entire foreign policy community and a good deal of the informed public freaked out last night when they thought Trump was actually going to get in a room with this guy with no conditions and start talking. I think what we heard was damage control today. That isn't happening. Secondly, it would be a horrendous mistake for the President of the United States to get on the stage with this individual who is a war criminal, who has, frankly, murdered Americans, imprisoned hundreds of thousands of his own people, starved millions of people, and that it is completely untenable for him to elevate him in that fashion. The North Koreans show no sign, and in fact, their entire regime is built on the premise that they will have nuclear weapons in order to leverage the United States to get off the Korean Peninsula and to reunify under their terms and conditions. So we have a very, very long way to go. I don't think this meeting, I certainly hope this meeting is never going to come off. And I think they figured a relatively clever way to say, well, we're not going to meet with him until, and those until measures are frankly not going to happen.
Kristen Walker, was that your take on things?
Which one?
Kristen Walker, can you hear me?
Hi, Katie. Yes, go ahead. Ask one more time.
Jennifer Rubin was just saying that she thinks that this is Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the White House walking back Donald Trump's announcement yesterday, or the South Korean official's announcement yesterday that said that they had agreed to a meeting, that today they woke up and they realized that they needed to put some conditions around this, and that ultimately a meeting is not going to happen if the conditions are denuclearization. Is that your reading on it?
I do think she was certainly less definitive today than we heard yesterday, that's for sure. And you heard her say, look, a whole range of possibilities could happen here. So she did walk back just a little bit. But again, what you heard here was this very fierce defense of what we saw here yesterday, effectively saying, look, we continue to apply maximum pressure to North Korea. She responded to whether or not the president was effectively being played. She went back to the argument that we hear at the White House here regularly, which is that the president is a negotiator. This is his chance to get into a room with the person who is essentially running all the levers in North Korea and try to get him to denuclearize. Now, as you know, there are a lot of skeptics, not only here, but also on Capitol Hill, who say, look, why should we believe North Korea now when they have proven themselves to be so untrustworthy in the past? And I think that's the real challenge. We also pressed her on the fact that this seemed to be a fairly haphazard process. She disputed that characterization. She said, look, this is something that the president's been working on for quite some time. But I think you're absolutely right to note that today there was just a little bit of a walk back in terms of this being a done deal, Katie.
Jonathan, you write about that in the AP today, about what it was like last night and how this announcement went down. It wasn't Donald Trump, the president of the United States, addressing a nation and saying, here is what we are going to do with this nation that has been threatening us. Here is what we are going to do with this leader who sent us back one of our citizens brain dead, who only died days later. A horrible incident. Here is what we are going to do with this leader who still has 3 Americans detained doing hard labor. How did it go down?
Yeah, this was not planned. Haphazard is a pretty good word, in fact. The president was not slated to meet with those South Korean officials until today, actually. But yesterday, he got wind that they were in the West Wing. They were meeting with National Security Advisor McMaster and some other national security officials. So he beckoned them into the Oval Office, basically moving up the meeting an entire day. And it was only then the South Korean security officials indicated that Kim Jong-un had this invitation, for the president to meet. And the president instantly said yes. And then within moments came to the briefing room, ducked his head out of the door, and for the first time that we're all aware of, for his first appearance in the White House briefing room, having been in office for more than a year, it told, like, hey, the South Koreans have an announcement coming in the next couple hours.
Was he just so excited that he needed to tell somebody and he was looking for the reporters so he could say, hey, listen, I get to have a meeting with Kim Jong-un?
You've covered this president as long as the rest of us have. That certainly fits his personality.
Longer.
Longer.
Just going to put it out there.
Well, but certainly this was not some sort of grand strategy by the National Security Council to roll it out this way.
I will say that. He will get excited about being able to do things that nobody else can do. And there's a certain legitimacy that he feels when he can be the one talking to somebody that everyone says he should not be talking to.
Nope.
Don't touch that red button, Donald Trump.
Right.
I'm going to want to touch that red button. I mean, that's the way he operates. That's the way he is. I want to talk about something else, and that's Stormy Daniels. And we're going to do that when we come after the break. I'm going to say goodbye and thank Bruce Klingner and Jennifer Rubin, Eli Stokols, Jonathan Lemire. Stay with us. We're going to come back in just a couple seconds. Stay with us.